Even before they were the focus of the Academy Award-winning 2018 film Bohemian Rhapsody, the popular British rock band Queen had already made a significant impact on the world of motion pictures. And no, I'm not just talking about that scene from Wayne's World. As discussed in the last episode of this very podcast, the group was so enamored with the early footage they saw of the 1980 sci-fi film Flash Gordon that not only did they agree to write and perform the memorable theme song, but lead singer Freddie Mercury even designed the film's logo. 6 years later, the band would be even more involved with another sci-fi cult classic, when they composed and performed 6 songs for the film Highlander, including the iconic Princes of the Universe, which would go on to become the Highlander franchise's de facto theme song, with a music video starring Christopher Lambert, and eventually heard over the opening of all 119 episodes of the 90s Highlander television series. Between these two instantly recognizable theme songs, it's no surprise that in a 2016 article on the sci-fi website Tor.com, author Brian Rapino wrote, "No band is more intimately connected with the world of science fiction and fantasy than the legendary Queen." But what many Queen fans might not realize is that, in addition to their undisputed connection to the world of sci-fi, they also have a very intriguing connection to the world of science fact. And that's thanks to the surprising background of Queen's lead guitarist, Brian May, who is not only a rock icon for helping found Queen, but is also a noted astrophysicist. May originally studied physics and mathematics at Imperial College London, graduating with upper second-class honors. He then began pursuing a PhD at Imperial from 1970 to 1974, concentrating his studies on reflected light from interplanetary dust and the velocity of dust in the plane of the solar system. But May was forced to somewhat put his scientific career on hold as Queen's success and popularity began to grow. He gave up pursuit of the PhD, but did still find time to co-author 2 peer-reviewed research papers based on personal observatory observations. In 2006, after over 3 decades of international fame and success with Queen, May finally found the time to more fully rededicate himself to his scientific pursuits, re-registering for his doctorate, and eventually earning it with his 2008 thesis, A Survey of Radial Velocities in the Zodiacal Dust Cloud. May would go on to co-author 2 well-regarded books on astronomy and astrophysics, Bang, The Complete History of the Universe, and The Cosmic Tourist. He would become a frequent guest and panelist on BBC programs dedicated to astronomy, and was ultimately appointed Chancellor and awarded an honorary fellowship from Liverpool John Moores University for his contributions to astronomy and his services to the public understanding of science. In 2014, he co-founded Asteroid Day, a global awareness campaign dedicated to educating the public on what we can do to protect ourselves from asteroids. And since 2015, he has even been a frequent collaborator with NASA, working on the science team involved with the New Horizons interplanetary space probe. May's scientific accomplishments are at this point, in fact, too numerous to adequately do them justice in this intro. But suffice to say, his work in these fields has been just as impressive and arguably even more important than his work with Queen. And he's almost certainly the most rock and roll scientist the scientific community has ever seen. Given that, it actually feels like something of a missed opportunity that Queen did not also perform a theme song for another cult 80s sci-fi property. One with a titular character who, to some degree, seems to bear some striking similarities to the multifaceted May, even to the point where you can't help but wonder if May was at least partly the inspiration for this film's own hard-rocking astrophysicist hero. And who knows, maybe it also takes someone of Brian May's intelligence to decipher the narrative of this rather perplexing cinematic oddity. The year is 1984, and despite understandable confusion over how to market the film, 20th Century Fox is still ready to launch the next big sci-fi action franchise with the adventures of Buckaroo Banzai across the 8th dimension. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris. And right off the bat, I just want to say a happy podversary to you, Trev.
Happy anniversary to you as well.
Yeah, we are recording August 8th, 2022. It is our second year of doing this since Trev swindled me into it. And there is no escape. And but in all seriousness, I'm having a blast doing the podcast. That's why I just wanted to make it upfront. Super fun. I look forward to it every couple weeks. And
it's been very fun. It's been nice to see it slowly but surely grow. And that also goes, as you said, when you say there's no escape, that goes to the list of movies we have, which also continues to slowly but surely grow. And so we will be doing this for years because Hollywood cannot stop screwing up, basically.
Yeah. The only escape is the sweet release of death.
Yes. And I know both of us, we're racing to get there.
Yeah.
And then even then, whoever dies first will just probably have to get a new co-host. You know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the legacy.
Because we're obligated. We're contractually obligated. And boy, do we have a doozy today. I've been looking forward to this one. This is the second installment in our Fall Back to the 80s, a 3-month series dedicated to the failed franchise starters of the 80s, the decade of my youth. Last episode, we looked at Flash Gordon. And this week we're looking at another cult sci-fi property, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. And before you say anything about it, Chris, I just want to say I've been very, very excited about this because this is a movie, as I said, I kind of grew up with to some degree. Definitely saw quite a bit when I was a kid on cable and video. And going back to that, what we said last time, right, about how during the 80s there's just certain things that were always on and you just kind of, took them in that way. But I knew this was like completely new to you. And I think there's not many, as you get older, you lose many of the joys in life, right? But I will say one of the great recurring joys in life will always be the first time you can get someone to watch The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension, because it's always an experience. Yes. So, Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about this fine 80s attempt at a franchise?
I almost thought you were going to say masterpiece or something. But this is directed by W.D. Richter. He only directed 2 features. This was his first. He's more of a writer in Hollywood. He wrote Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Dracula 79, and Big Trouble in Little China, a Trev favorite.
Yes.
He goes on to write Stealth.
A hated movie from Chris.
Oh, yeah. No, come on. I got to give it another chance. But he goes on to write Stealth.
Yeah.
Are we going to have to talk about that movie one day?
Probably, yeah. Like I said, it never stops, man. It never stops. But also, I like the leap from Invasion of the Body Snatchers to Buckaroo Banzai to Stealth. That's a varied career. Yeah.
Yes. This movie in particular was written by Earl Mac Rauch. He's a novelist who wrote the book that this is based on. Not many film credits. The most notable one was he actually wrote Scorsese's New York, New York.
Yes.
So I saw that. The budget of this film is between $12 and $17 million. Worldwide, it made $6.2 million. Part of that reasoning, well, a lot of reasons we'll get to, but one of it was that it was originally scheduled for June of 84, but pushed back to August 10th, where the studio dumped it between Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, Temple of Doom, and Ghostbusters. So it had absolutely no chance. No chance.
This is one of the things about the 80s when you go back, and it's kind of fun to look at every year of the 80s and just see the crazy amount of, pop culture, gigantic blockbusters that came out, right? Mm-hmm. But you always look at that and go like, man, that would suck to be like a smaller movie coming out amidst all that stuff, and that was certainly, and also I think as we're going to talk about, this movie had other challenges as well.
Yeah.
Honestly, without even getting into what we feel about it yet, I will just say, you look at this movie, and I'm surprised it made $6.2 million. Honestly, like that's a pretty high gross for a film that would have been up against some of the challenges we'll talk about.
Yeah. I guess, do you want to start with? I guess you just said that you kind of grew up with this movie a little bit.
Well, to the degree of almost any of the movies we're going to talk about in Fall Back to the 80s, right? And especially in this first half. Again, Buckaroo Banzai. I want to save what I have to say until we start reviewing it.
Sure.
But like I said last time, just like Flash Gordon, just like A Big Trouble in Little China, just like A Last Dragon, Clue, some of the early Police Academy films, even those early Star Trek films, like you just referenced, Search for Spock, Ghostbusters. I could just keep naming them, but there were certain movies that in the 80s and even leading into the early 90s a little bit were just on TV all the time. And I don't know if that was like they were trying to recoup some of that with Buckaroo Banzai. I don't know if that was trying to like recoup some of that attention that they didn't get when they're in theaters or whatever. But like I said last time, I don't want to reiterate this every episode and fall back to the 80s, but cable and video was new,
Yeah.
so the options were limited and some of these things just got replayed a lot. And I feel like what I will say, because this doesn't get into feelings about the movie, I will say, and this won't be surprising at all, we talked last time about how Flash Gordon is like a cult film now, and we were kind of baffled by that. But I'll say, like, as a kid, I never had a sense of Flash Gordon as like a cult movie, right? It was just like, oh, that was another big sci-fi movie that came out. And when you're a kid, you don't know what bombs and what's successful. So I was just like, oh, Flash Gordon, that's like another Star Wars, right? Or that's like another one of those because it's on TV all the time. I definitely think Buckaroo Banzai was one of the first movies I had a sense of being like a cult thing. Even as a kid, you were kind of aware that, oh, only certain people know about this, and some people are like really into it, but it's really weird,
Right.
So that's kind of like what I remember about getting when I would see it younger, because as we'll say, like, this is when you watch this movie younger, you're probably not really getting it, So
You're not getting it when you're younger?
Yeah, you're not getting. Well, no, it's yeah. Okay, we'll say.
We'll say. Yeah. And for newer listeners, what we like to do is we like to talk up front about the history of the film, and then we go into a review. So we usually save our actual thoughts till later. And me and Trev actually don't discuss it prior.
Yeah.
So we like to spring it on each other. But the
last thing I'll say to that, Chris, is just like, because going back to what I was saying about how catching it on cable all the time, I do realize now too that this is, like I said last time, a lot of movies you would see a lot, but never like from beginning to end, right? You would like be flipping through the channels and Buckaroo Banzai would come on halfway through. So I bet you I saw this a lot like in snippets. And now I say that's just, imagine how much even more confusing it is. If you're not taking it all in from beginning to end, if you're just seeing this in pieces, I will fully admit this was a movie that, this movie baffled me as a child.
Sure. So, according to like the history and behind the scenes nature of this film, typically me and Trev scour the internet. We try to find interesting factoids, behind the scenes drama, all that stuff. Well, with this one, there's obviously a lot to talk about, but we didn't have to look that far. Pretty much everything was nicely in the Wikipedia page for this film. So if it sounds like we're plagiarizing, I mean, we're trying not to, but really that's the best spot where we found everything. So we're kind of just going to summarize the wiki page for you. And discuss the ins and outs of it more personally. So
yeah, because I took some time to like watch and read a couple other little things. But all this was nicely summarized on the Wikipedia page for once. Wikipedia is not always your best friend, but this one, whoever is maintaining the Buckaroo Banzai page, maybe it's Peter Weller himself. I don't know. Good job. That's all right.
Yeah. So the story of Buckaroo Banzai goes back to really the late 70s or mid 70s at this point. W.D. Richter, the director, his wife, was reading a review of Dirty Pictures from the Prom, the debut novel from Earl Mac Rauch, and she loved it. So she passed it off to her husband, Richter, and Richter wrote a letter to Mac Rauch, and they just started to kind of correspond and talk and get to know each other. Yeah. And at this point, Richter is he's gaining steam in Hollywood as a writer, and he has an open invitation for Rauch to come to L.A. and to meet and to hang out and discuss his ideas. Perhaps they can get some work together done. So it takes about 10 years for this, right? Would you say 10 years or so?
Close to, yeah. It takes a while for it to kind of happen, yeah.
Yeah, but Rauch comes to L.A. and they have a dinner, and he starts talking about a character that he wants to write stories about called Buckaroo Banzai. So then Richter and his wife pay Rauch $1,500 to go off and write a screenplay.
Yeah. And this is where you get into Rauch's very, very interesting writing and development style. And this is like what I find fascinating.
Style used very, very loosely. Okay.
Yeah. Well, but again, we'll get like once we talk about the movie, we'll talk about like how maybe you can see this in the movie.
Yes.
Right? Because it's so he's given this money. He knows he has this character Buckaroo Banzai that he wants to develop. And then what he essentially does is Rauch goes off and starts writing several stories about this character. but not finishing any of them.
No.
Like it said that he would get like about 30 or 40 pages into each script and then just abandon it and put it in a drawer and start up a new one. And then he just keeps doing this. And meanwhile, I think like he's showing this to Richter, and Richter's liking what he's seeing, but none of it is getting finished. One thing Richter does tell him is that Richter's helping him make some revisions, and at some point Richter changes the name to Buckaroo Banzai instead of Buckaroo Bandy, which Rauch is not a huge fan of, but ultimately just goes with it. And that's when that's on like one of the treatments. You know, there's a bunch of different treatments that he had, and one of them was called "Find the Jet Car," said the president, a Buckaroo Banzai thriller. I believe that's the one where Richter makes the name change. But there's some other ones, right? He's like writing these other ones. One of the ones which made me laugh as I was looking through this was he another early draft that he created or story for this character was called "The Strange Case of Mr. Cigars," and all it says is it was about a huge robot and a box of Adolf Hitler's cigars.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's just like he's writing all these Buckaroo Banzai stories, but not finishing any of them. They're all just works in progress essentially. But what's happening, obviously, as he's doing that, is he's inadvertently developing this kind of huge, expansive world and universe for this character.
A bunch of ideas, but not finishing anything. He was J.J. Abrams before J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, that's.
But basically, yeah, like what Trev's saying, he's just a bunch of treatments, a bunch of different stories, and finally they have something that's working. So in 1980, Richter talks to Frank Marshall, famed mega producer Frank Marshall, and Neil Canton about filming one of these screenplays. So they meet with each other, and then Mac Rauch goes off and makes a 60-page treatment called, again, name change, Lepers from Saturn. Yeah. So they shop this around. Obviously, nobody's biting because this man is a madman, to say the least. Yeah. But they end up going to Sidney Beckerman at MGM, who says, "Yep, I like this. Let's do something. Let's meet with the studio chief, David Begelman."
And even that right there, I know you want to we'll continue that story in a second.
Sure,
but the fact that they took it to someone, a veteran producer at MGM, who looked at all this material and said, "Yeah, you know what? I think my studio should make this." This is exactly what we were talking about last time. This is the 80s.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
This is a decade fueled by cocaine, money to burn, and just wild ideas, right? The idea of like saying like, yeah, well, I guess like let's take a shot at this. And again, this is probably still a little bit of the Star Wars effect too. Every studio, the stories were out. Every studio in Hollywood knew the stories about how everybody had passed on Star Wars, right? And nobody wanted to do that again. Nobody wanted to well, obviously a lot of people did because a lot of people did pass on this, but everybody still was probably looking for, what if this is my Star Wars?
Sure.
What if the thing that I say yes to, even though I don't maybe get it, what if that's the one that hits? So I think a lot of these crazy, especially crazy sci-fi properties, had a better chance of getting greenlit back then.
Well, the funny part is they go to David Begelman, the studio chief of MGM, right? And within 24 hours, they're greenlit. They have a development deal. They go off to make the movie, to write the script, like an actual shooting script. And Mac Rauch, again, does a lot of changes the lepers in the name to lizards, and then to lectroids from Planet 10.
Yes.
So again, further tinkering. And we keep saying this because it's going to lead into what we talk about the movie, but there's further tinkering along the way at every step.
And we should say that goes back to Rauch's initial inspiration for this he was quoted saying that he wanted this to be like one of those out and out press the accelerator to the floor nonstop kung fu movies of the early 70s. So he was trying to create something crazy, right? So it's not like he was accidentally doing that. It's just I don't know. He was maybe taking his inspirations a little too to heart or something because he was out of control.
Yeah, or mountains of cocaine.
Yeah,
yeah. Allegedly. Now we get to an F2F classic. Producerial changes.
Yeah, we need a theme song for this or something.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe this episode I might throw it in. But yes, Begelman leaves MGM right after greenlighting this film because a bunch of his projects performed poorly.
Yeah. And somebody at MGM with eyes and a brain that works, looks at this script or whatever they have at that point and goes, "What? What did we greenlight?"
Yeah.
And so suddenly Buckaroo Banzai is no longer on the docket at MGM.
Yes, and that's why MGM lets Begelman exercise his buyout option, takes the script, he owns it now, and guess what? Goes to the home of Star Wars, 20th Century Fox. So again, Trev just mentioned that Star Wars changed the world regardless, but especially in the early 80s, everybody was looking for their Star Wars, and it's just hilarious that Buckaroo Banzai ends up just, kind of full circle back at 20th Century Fox, who's in the middle of just, I guess, ending Star Wars at this point, because when is this all happening? Probably like 81, 82? And then, Jedi comes out 83, so.
Yeah, they're getting worried. They're like, oh my god, Jedi is going to like end Star Wars?
Totally.
We better get ready to make 6 Buckaroo Banzai movies.
So then what does Mac Roach do, Trev? He writes 3 more drafts before we get to the shooting script. And by the time of filming, Trev, Richter had compiled a 300-page book called The Essential Buckaroo. This guy likes titling things. That's what I'm realizing. That's what I'm realizing. So the movie's kind of ready to go now, right? And who do we cast? What do we need to do? Richter, the director, wanted an actor who could both look heroic with grease all over his face and project the kind of intelligence you would associate with a neurosurgeon and inventor. Now, put a pin in that for a second. We have not mentioned who Buckaroo Banzai is as a character. He's everything.
Yeah.
Basically that's what it is. He's a rock star, neurosurgeon, scientist, just an all-around good at everything kind of guy.
As it's described in the wiki, Dr. Buckaroo Banzai, a physicist, neurosurgeon, test pilot, and rock star. And they don't mean rock star like in mentality. No, legitimate rock star.
Yes.
Him and his also scientist friends front or have a very popular rock band, the Hong Kong Cavaliers.
So who do they look for? They get...
Well, I saw, before you say who they did get, and this is not from the wiki, but I did see in IMDb trivia, I don't know if you noticed this, that apparently 2 names they considered were Tom Hanks and Michael Keaton.
Oh, interesting. Okay, one of those I like a lot.
One of those I do. I like both those guys, but one of them is very, very wrong for this part. One of them would have been very good, yes.
Yeah, and that would be Michael Keaton, obviously.
Yes.
Yes. I love Tom Hanks, but... He's America's dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not the adventurer guy to me, but they look to Peter Weller here, though, of RoboCop fame. I guess not yet.
Well, not yet, no.
No, not yet. But what do they? I think one of them, or Rauch or Richter, saw him in a play.
Well, they saw it, and also in the 1982 film Shoot the Moon. I think they'd seen him in that, and also liked him for that, and so they kind of came to him. But yeah, he was also doing some stage work. Yeah. And they came to him, and not surprisingly, he looked at it and said, "What?" He was hesitant at first because he did not understand. He didn't understand the role. He didn't understand the tone, and so they kind of had to have a number of conversations with him, trying to get explained to him. And it took him a while, but eventually he decided to go along with it. And once they kind of explained to him that this character was meant to be kind of this jack of all trades, and a character that you could bring in like a lot of different kind of perspectives and characterizations for, Peter Weller has said that he ultimately ended up basing his portrayal on, and I love this, Elia Kazan, Jacques Cousteau, Albert Einstein, Leonardo da Vinci, and Adam Ant. So he just threw all those in a blender and somehow found Buckaroo Banzai.
Yes. And now we need a villain.
Yes.
So Rauch actually wrote the film for John Lithgow. I really like John Lithgow. He's, famed character actor. He's mostly pops up in tons of shit. Right? I never really watched Third Rock from the Sun, to be honest. That's one I skipped. I wasn't a huge fan of it. But I like John Lithgow, his 80s to 90s career especially. Me and you and our buddies used to do, especially during pandemic, we would get together every Tuesday and watch fun 90s movies or something on Zoom, and we watched Cliffhanger together, and that was a great time.
Because that's the same. Like I love John Lithgow too, but I especially love him whenever he plays a villain.
Yes,
he seems like a very, very nice man in real life. Like, he's one of those actors you never hear a bad thing about, and he just seems so lovable. and charismatic and just so friendly in every appearance you see of him. But there's something about him where he can just tap into something very scary as a villain. And he was, and like, before it went off the rails, he was obviously like the best villain on Dexter, the Trinity Killer in season 4. It's just an all-timer TV villain. But then, Cliffhanger, he's a very fun, like, over-the-top villain. I don't know if you've ever seen Raising Cain. He's really scary in that as well, I think. I love him as a villain. This is I wouldn't call this a scary villain, Dr. Emil Lizardo, but you can see like why they wanted John Lithgow. I think they knew right off the bat that he is a guy who is willing to tap into that kind of over-the-top, ridiculous. I think it sounds like he says too that just like Weller, he was kind of confused by the script. But I think right away he probably got it a little bit more, and he certainly was able to lean into what the movie was to a pretty high degree.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then they go to cast Ellen Barkin as the female lead. I'm not I know her name. I'm not super well versed with her filmography. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
But she and this is becoming a theme though. Most everybody has no idea what they're signing on for.
Yep.
That's what I'm getting through the research here. Is nobody knew what the hell this was, but I guess Rauch and Richter are good salespeople.
Good salespeople, and then I've heard they were apparently like fun to work with, and were very like open to collaboration and taking new ideas all the time. Which again, Rauch seems like he could never finish the screenplay, so I'm not surprised he was always willing to just listen to other ideas and incorporate them. And it seems like the cast and crew really enjoyed working with Richter. So yeah, they were. I'm sure they were good at sitting down and being like, look, we know this makes no sense, but just come along with us on this ride. Maybe that's what it was too, right? Maybe a little bit was just like, let's dive in and see what happens, because this is just so bizarre.
Trev, it was exactly this, okay? It was this. Okay. Settle in, guys. Okay, and the other two notable cast members are Jeff Goldblum, a Chris and Trev favorite, all-timer favorite. No need to get into any. Jeff Goldblum is a national treasure, an international treasure, honestly. And then Christopher Lloyd. Right off the. This is right before Back to the Future, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Oh, it is right.
The same year, he's also playing the villain in the main villain in Star Trek 3, Search for Spock. He's the main Klingon in that.
Right. That is funny. I do like that that they. Star Trek clobbered this movie. There's a bunch of other cast members we'll get into just when we talk about the film, but those are like the main people. There's a lot of people in this movie that actually really excited me. Clancy Brown's in it. Dan Hedea's in it.
Jonathan Banks shows up.
100%.
Yeah.
So there's just a variety of Hollywood talent in this film. So then they have their cast and they're off to shoot. This is where a lot of the problems start to happen. Like, obviously, again, at this point, there's a 300-page, Bible to the film, but also so many different drafts, so many different things. Now, the first issue is the cinematographer, Jordan Cronenweth. He was initially hired and shot some of the film. He is most notable for Blade Runner, actually, which I learned. And you can tell, actually, when one of the more famous things that he did shoot. By the way, he's uncredited on the film. He shot this bar scene. It's got like this blue tint and everything. It's actually very Blade Runner-esque now that I think about it. But halfway through production, they replace him with Fred J. Konekamp. Again, the movies. I don't want to get into how I feel about it, but it's definitely. Let's just say it's all over the place for now. So the biggest issue does seem to be, again, the producerial interference, right? David Begelman, remember, the guy that was kind of the champion of this film, that brought it to 20th Century Fox, just starts to interfere all the time. Demanding changes, sending notes, just adding
it's
things. It's
interesting, right?
Because
he saw something in it where he was willing to take this kind of huge risk on, taking it from one studio to another, even like buying it, getting the rights back, taking it to a different studio, even forming his own like kind of company to help forming his own company to kind of get it going. And then now suddenly, was this like buyer's remorse or something? Was the reality what this project was sinking in? Was it like him seeing how wild the production was? Whatever the case, it sounds like he got a little bit more worried. And where Richter and Rausch definitely saw this as a franchise. They were looking at this as like, well, there's going to be multiple chapters after this. We'll even like tease the next chapter. Begelman was kind of insistent, this is going to be the only Buckaroo Banzai movie we make, right? So he starts like enforcing story and script changes on them to kind of reflect that. He doesn't want to like set up for the next film. So there's this like mysterious villain who originally was only referenced, who was meant to be setting up for the next film. And he has them like cut all references to that villain, including cutting an entire opening sequence which features Jamie Lee Curtis, which you can watch on YouTube, but is not a part of the film anymore.
Yeah. They also add a credit scene, which I'm sure we'll talk about. The movie ends in a certain way, and he demanded it needed more. So they film kind of like a music video at the end. Again, this movie comes out in between 3 mega hits, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess in retrospect, they become mega hits, right? Like nobody knew Ghostbusters was gonna take off like it did. But the problem with marketing this film is nobody knew what the hell it was. Once again, didn't know.
I've heard
what was
Peter
going
Weller
on.
even say that he had like Fox executives come to him and be like, "What would you do? Like, how would you market this?" You know, because they just had no idea.
Yeah, I thought that was actually hilarious. Trev sent me a link to a Q&A with Kevin Smith, Peter Weller, and John Lithgow. And first of all, those two guys, the cast members, obviously, seem to really appreciate being in this film. After all we're going to talk about and the legacy of it, they seem equally as baffled by a rabid fan base. But they seem to have had a blast making it, which is cool. And they are appreciative of it. So
yeah.
But 20th Century Fox kind of drops the ball marketing. They do not promote it.
I mean, in their defense, you say they dropped the ball, but in their defense, Chris, I ask you, how would you promote The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai across the 8th dimension?
Yeah, you're right. Actually, what they do is probably better than I could think of. And
I don't know if you saw this part in the Q&A, but they were very right that the biggest problem they had was this was before the internet. This is a movie that definitely would have benefited from months of like viral marketing, finding the fan base ahead of time, and getting the fan base excited for what is obviously going to be such a weird film. But they didn't have that, right? So they did some Hail Marys. They promoted it a lot. They went to Star Trek conventions and showed clips of it and gave out Buckaroo Banzai headbands, which I guess have become like a very sought-after collectible online. And they did like a Marvel Comics tie-in. They put the movie poster in a lot of Marvel Comics, and then did a 2-issue Marvel Comics adaptation, which actually I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But they were faced with it. I sympathize with them to a certain degree, to look at this and be like, all right, what's the trailer for this? Who do we market this to? What part of the tone do we try to sell? I'm sure this was a head scratcher.
Yeah. Well, speaking of head scratcher, should we just get into it?
Let's do it.
He's a rocker. Doctor.
Don't tug on that. You never know what it might be attached to.
Inventor.
Activate oscillator.
It's broken the sound barrier.
Philosopher.
No matter where you go, there you are.
And the only hero.
Buckaroo.
Buckaroo.
Buckaroo. Curse you, Banzai!
Who can save us all.
Evil. You're inseparable from the 8th dimension. Venom.
Launch thermal pod.
Buckaroo Banzai is pure nutty fun.
Buckaroo, you would have got your thruster.
Why don't you hold on to it for a while?
The cult sci-fi classic.
Run!
In a dimension all its own.
Real-life Martians landing in New Jersey.
Holy Toledo. We will fire a portable beam weapon. Vaporize the whole damn planet?
If we blow this today,
Get him up.
there ain't no tomorrow.
Left, I said left. This is left. I mean my left. All left. Go your right.
Buckaroo, President's calling about, is everything okay with the alien space cloud from Planet 10, or should we just go ahead and destroy Russia?
Tell him yes on 1 and no on 2.
The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai.
Which was yes, destroy Russia or number 2?
Okay, Trev, here's my plot summary, as I always do. And
Chris, I'm praying for you here, buddy.
yeah, I think I got it. I think I've got it a good hold on it, but
Okay.
we will go through it after the fact. But here we go.
Godspeed, my friend.
Buckaroo Banzai, a physicist, neurosurgeon, test pilot, rock star, adventurer, celebrity, and trusted associate of the U.S. government, must save the world from evil interdimensional aliens called Lectroids from Planet 10. Buckaroo and his team of Hong Kong Cavaliers have perfected the oscillation overthruster, which allows him to travel through solid matter by using the eighth dimension. But when Dr. Emilio Lizardo devises a plot to steal the device and bring an evil army back to destroy Earth, Buckaroo goes head-to-head with the madman in a battle that could spell certain doom for the universe. Along with his crime-fighting buddies, the long-lost twin sister of his late wife, and some good Rastafarian Lectroids, this modern Renaissance man will stop at nothing to save our world. That was okay.
Yeah, you hear that and you think to yourself, maybe if anyone's listening to this and hasn't seen the movie and has been listening to our intro, maybe they listen to that and go like, well, that seems like, that doesn't sound that complicated.
Yeah.
But who buddy? That's I commend you, Chris, for what made definitely made it sound more simple, made it sound more concise. But that is scratching the surface of what this movie is and how that information is doled out to the viewer, I guess, is the bigger part of it. So, Chris, I actually want you to go first this time because I'm just very, very curious as someone coming to Buckaroo Banzai for the first time, knowing like barely anything about it. I just can't wait to hear how you felt about this movie.
So I rarely will text Trev while I watch things, and even less so after the fact. Maybe I'll just tell him that, okay, well, I finished the movie, I'm ready to go. But this one, I was overcome with such a level of frustration that, like, Trev knows me really well, and I have a gauge that I can withstand quite a lot of, what's the word? Like, I like David Lynch. Let's just say it that way. I like David Lynch films. Trev has told me about or sent me off a few to definitely check out. And I like his lack of focus on the plot. And there's something about a Lynchian film that draws you in. This one, however, is so inexplicable, dated as hell. It's a tonal mess. It's all over the map. Completely incoherent. And here's a quote from W.D. Richter talking about the cult following of this film, and he says, "Some loathe it, and others are willing to die for it." Trev, I loathe this movie so hard, and I spent the last day or so with YouTube reviews or something on in the background because I just needed to know. I needed to know what this fandom sees. What am I missing? What do they like? And there's something to be said from our Flash Gordon episode where I mentioned how when you're a kid or when you're growing up, you remember scenes of things, right? You don't really remember the full extent of the movie. So, for people, Flash Gordon was their favorite movie, but they only really remembered the football scene, right? Or the Hawkman scene. This feels like that because there's just like, it's just so baffling. It's just so, I'm like rubbing my temples right now. It's so baffling to me. And I feel like sometimes you need to look through, like you have to look at movies like this through adult eyes and not man-baby ones. Because all the YouTube reviews, everybody's just like jerking this movie off. Like they're just, oh, what a hidden masterpiece, and oh, it's genre defying, and it's creating a universe ahead of its time. It's pure art, as Kevin Smith calls it. One reviewer I saw said something like, it fulfills the true believer's promise of Stan Lee, where you just understand references for the sake of understanding them. And you know what? Sometimes things are just a fucking clusterfuck of a mess, okay? And that's what I feel this movie is. I feel like this movie is just a mess. It's just a mess. Cool ideas, good for you. But there's a reason why W.D. Richter made one other movie after this. There's a reason why Rauch doesn't write film. This movie just does not work, and it's just scenes thrown together, and I'm like mad. This is one of those ones that I'm mad at. like I had to text Trev during this with a picture of myself because my face watching this movie was just complete. Like, what is going on? I could not wait for this to be over. I really could not wait for this to be over. So, what do you? I'm sure you loved it, probably, right, Trev? Did you love it? What did you tell me? Tell me what you thought.
They said like loathe it or willing to die for it, right? And you definitely fall into loathe it. Chris, I gotta tell you, I'm here today to die for Buckaroo Banzai.
Oh my god.
I
knew it. I fucking knew it.
But here's the thing. So even saying that though, this won't be as contentious as some of our other disagreements.
Sure, of course.
Because it's not like I can be like, well, that's weird that you didn't get it. You know, it's like I'm not an idiot, right? This is not a movie for everyone.
Yeah.
And it can't shock me when I meet someone who's confused, just entirely like baffled by this film. And I won't deny that that's a large part of what I enjoy about it.
Sure.
But I will say that, and like you said, I'm guessing that you were kind of probably, assuming that I liked it because of what this movie is. And I do think it's not, I'm going to defend myself a little bit. I don't think it's just taking it as a kid, because as I said, actually, when I was a kid, I wanted to like this movie. I wanted to like figure it out because, as I said, I was very aware of there being this like cult following of it, and it was a movie that seemed like the cool people liked, right? Like that's kind of my initial perception of it as a kid was, oh, before we even knew what hipsters were, it seemed like a hipster movie, right? Only like you had to. Not everybody liked this, but the ones who did, man, they seemed to like really like it. There must be something cool about it. But as a kid, I would like watch parts of it and be like, what? I don't get it. Like it's really tough. And that's why I mentioned the Marvel Comics 2-issue adaptation. I wanted to bring that up because I actually came across that as a kid, and I had it. And man, I wish I still had it, because I bet you it's probably worth something now. But it's like one of those things I just lost over the years. It's actually a very good adaptation of the movie. And there was something about being able to sit down and kind of read that, and read it like over and over. And then I will also say, like, as I got older and revisited the movie, the point I was trying to make here was that I think I definitely appreciate this more as an adult than I did as a kid. And I do think it's a movie that the first time you watch it, it is entirely incomprehensible. It's like challenging you to what can be a frustrating degree. But I'm here to say, like, I get it now. You know, it's just a movie that takes multiple viewings. And the question is will you connect enough to it the first time to want to go back? Obviously, you don't. But I think, like, the second and third time, it is, like, the reason you were able to come up with a plot synopsis that does kind of work is because, honestly, there is a easy to decipher through line here. It's just the way, like I said, the way the movie's like presenting it to you. But the more times you watch it, the more you get it. And I think now I understand the plot, and I do just enjoy the overall oddness and absurdity of it. And this goes to when we were talking about, like, it sounds like you and I have very different opinions of how Rausch went about writing this. I actually genuinely love that idea of like starting all these stories, not finishing them, and then at a certain point just going, okay, well now let's finally put one together, and I'll just take pieces from all of those. And I kind of do respect that mentality that they've talked about since, of saying, yeah, we ended up actually just creating this whole expansive universe, and we could just pull pieces in, and we're just going to throw them in, and we're not going to explain them. Honestly, this is not too dissimilar from what Lucas was trying to do with A New Hope, right? Just saying, like, we're throwing you into a universe, we're not explaining everything. It's a universe that's already existed, and we're going to act like you already kind of know it, and we'll just throw you in. The last thing I'll say before we get into more specific thoughts is I think every once in a while, cinema and like movies need something like this. I think every once in a while, Hollywood and motion pictures need like a shock to the system, and a movie that reminds you just how fun, like completely unbridled creativity can be. And that's what I look at. Like, I'm not saying this movie is like on the same level as something like Everything Everywhere All at Once, but I look at them as like two of a kind, essentially. Like movies where it's just like you come up with an idea and go, fuck yeah, let's just do it. Let's just throw it in there. Why not? That's what I respect about it. And like even just the character of Buckaroo Banzai having like all these like different roles, and just the movie going like, You just accept it. I'm sorry, you have to accept that he's this famous rock star and a famous neurophysicist and a test pilot. The whole world knows him. He has all these like civilians called the Blue Blazers that work for him. Just go with it. And I go, okay, I will. Why not?
Okay, and like I see what you're saying, and honestly, this goes back to I watched Ebert and Siskel's review of the movie, and Ebert gave it a thumbs down, but a reluctant thumbs down, because he says this quote, and I actually will. I will say this defends the movie, and I agree with it. It's bad, but it never gives up.
Yes.
So I think that's a great way of describing this movie. So I see what you're saying. I understand what you're getting at. I hate that you put this in the same breath as Everything Everywhere All at Once. That's blasphemous. But I think this movie's ideas are there. Fine. I'm all for new, different, weird ideas. That's not my point. I think this movie is like on a filmmaking level, I think it fails. It fails. Like there's a shot at 1 hour and 8 minutes where the camera just doesn't follow Penny being like the played by Ellen Barkin moving out of the frame. It just lingers there. It's a mistake. It's there's not enough coverage in the film. It's disorientating and it's just frustrating. There's a shot where somebody makes a recoil movement with their gun, and the muzzle flare is not there. So he's mimicking it, and they didn't retake the shot because they don't have enough coverage. It's a problem with the editing. There's a character that flubs a line talking to the president at 1 hour and 9 minutes and 30 seconds. Just flubs the line. They don't retake it.
Strategic Space Command now reports all the surveillance satellite communication jammed.
And that drives me crazy. And even Richter is on record saying the narrative was too complex. He would have liked to have had more coverage for certain scenes. He could have edited the film better, and there were too many master shots and two shots that left little for the editor to work with. So that's where I'm getting at. My point is, like, I'm totally fine with like a bunch of crazy, kooky, wild, zany ideas, but the movie just like doesn't come together on like a technical aspect either, and it's just that's what's so disorientating. It's not that I don't understand the plot for the most part. It's that it's like thrown together in a blender, and the editor had no idea what to do with this.
But let me come to its defense just a little bit again here.
Sure.
And I not that I think
do you hear what I'm saying though? Do you understand?
Well, yeah, and I'm about to respond to it, dude. Calm down. Stop getting so heated. All right. I know Buckaroo Banzai made you lose your mind, but hold on a sec.
It's been oozing out of my ears for the last 24 hours.
What I will say to this, and because I obviously I'm a person who watches a lot of movies. I have eyes and ears. I'm not like immune to these problems as I watch the film.
Sure.
This is like, you've heard me say this like 1,000 times. I've probably said it before on this podcast. One of the things I love the most in movies is ambition, and ambition usually trumps almost anything for me. And I think a lot of what you're reacting negatively to in terms of the filmmaking, there was two like obstacles this movie was up against. So first of all, for as ambitious as this story is and how big this universe is and everything, honestly, I can't believe they gave it $12 million. But $12 million also probably isn't enough of a budget for what this is. Sure. Like that, this is the story alone and like how comprehensive and everything it is. This should be $30 to $40 million. So that's part of it. It's cheaper than it should be. And also, we do have to admit that it's directed by a first-time director. W.D. Richter had not directed up until this point. He had only written. And this is look, they had a 300-page document. They had a screenplay that was compiled from multiple drafts of unfinished screenplays. They had this wild, crazy material that even the cast was like, huh? That's pretty hard for a first-time director who doesn't know what he's doing. So I agree. It's a very Shaggy Dog movie. But I think that also is what adds to its charms. And I think if it was, this is what I always say. I think I will take an ambitious, poorly made or like janky movie, usually over like an incredibly well made, boring movie or like nothing story. Right? I'm more intrigued by everything that's like strange about Buckaroo Banzai than I am by the fact that maybe it was a little bit out of W.D. Richter's abilities. Right? I think honestly that that Shaggy element of it is why we still talk about it today, and why you saw these people on YouTube who are like obsessed with it. I think if you gave this to like, I'm not gonna. James Cameron was the first example that came to my mind. He would not have made this. But like, if you found like, let's say you found like one of those like TV directors who just like works consistently in TV, right? And those guys like Marvel will hire and be like, we know you're just gonna bring this in under budget and on time, right? And you gave them this, and they created like the most polished version of Buckaroo Banzai. It wouldn't have become a cult hit, I don't think. It would just be like this strange little thing that came out. And I think the Shaggy element of it actually helps it a little bit. So again, I don't think that's necessarily going to convince everybody. But does that make sense to you? How like the oddness of the movie and the oddness of the story is almost benefited in a weird way by just how kind of like ramshackle and amateurish some of it feels.
No, and I get that. I really do. I'm not immune to those feelings as well. But you know what drives me sometimes crazy within the film community or film Twitter, and this isn't directed towards you either, by the way. I just want to point that out. But it's like sometimes things are bad. Sometimes things are thrown together, and yes, we remember it because it's a mess, but that doesn't mean it's good. That means it's a mess, and you remember it because it was a mess. And I see some charm to that, I guess. Like, I'm trying to even convince myself now, but it's like sometimes film geeks like ourselves grab hold onto something and prop it up where it's almost like the hipster effect. That's maybe what I want to say. Yeah, it's kind of like the hipster effect. Like, this thing is junk, but all of a sudden now it's like, oh, but I saw this junk first, and now it's amazing. And I've never liked that. I hear what you're saying. That hipster mentality drives me crazy.
I hear what you're saying. I kind of want to agree, but like not concerned, because I don't think this is appreciated by people. Certainly not me. Like on the same level as something like The Room, or Birdemic, or Troll 2, or even this isn't like, I don't like this the same way I like Ed Wood films.
Well, those are ironic. Those are that ironic watch too, right?
Right.
Like that's yeah.
And this to me isn't ironic. This to me more is like, boy, they were really going for something, right? That's what I mean. And that's, and I think a lot of times they're actually getting there. Like, whatever you say about the filmmaker, whatever, I'm sorry, I am genetically unable to not be like taken by a rock star neurophysicist with a band called the Hong Kong Cavaliers who travel around in a giant bus and save the world whenever the government needs them to. I'm just like, yeah, all right, man, I'm here for the ride. And like, it's really stupid, but I think it is knowingly stupid. Also, that's the thing. I think we haven't mentioned this yet. I don't think this is a movie that's unaware of what it is. I do think the people making it, maybe not the cast, but I think the writer and director knew they were making an insane movie. I think they were aiming for that. And like I said, this is a decade that had a lot of movies like that. I legitimately think they were trying to make something that would confuse people, that would be like very weird and bizarre. And I maybe even think maybe they already had an idea that we're not going to get everyone with this, but the people we'll get are going to love it. And sometimes you see movies like that, right? Where it's the Scott Pilgrim versus the World thing, right? Of saying like, this isn't a movie that everyone's going to love, but the people who love it are going to love it. Right. And I think that's what this movie is aiming for as well.
Yeah. And again, that's something to appreciate from it. And it's definitely something I understood. Like, I mean, if they're making this, of course they're, at least, like you said, two people know what they were making. But I think because everybody else wasn't in on the, I don't want to say joke, because I don't think that's what they're doing. Like you said, it's not like Birdemic. But there's just a lack of communication. I don't know. It's just like there's like,
I don't feel like that affects the movie as much. Like, to me, this is more, I think this is like infinitely more rewatchable than Flash Gordon. Like, to me, like, because
I think it's because this is a puzzle and you have to watch it a bunch of times to even appreciate it.
Well, I think there's a part of that. So earlier on you mentioned, and I'm glad you brought it up because I wanted to go back to it. You said the thing about, and we talked about this in our Flash Gordon episode, the idea of why some people latch on to movies from their youths and they go like, well, I think that movie's really good. Then you go, what did you like? And they only remember two scenes.
Yeah.
And we mentioned that with Flash Gordon, how there's like 2 or 3 really cool scenes, and that's what everyone seems to remember. What I'll say about Buckaroo Banzai is, you can only remember certain scenes, but every scene in this is so weird. You know what I mean? There's not a normal scene in this movie. Like, from the moment, like, you brought up the nightclub scene, and like what could just be like, oh, okay, well, now the movie's just gonna have like a standard like rock and roll number since they have a rock and roll band.
Yeah.
No, he somehow hears a girl crying underneath the loud rock music, all the way back at the back of the club. Stops the song. Sarah decides to serenade her, and she tries to kill herself. Like even that scene ends up going just off the wall and is bonkers.
Right.
So there's not one normal scene. So whatever you remember, it's like, what was going on with that? That was really strange. You know what? I don't know if you've ever seen Repo Man, the Alex Cox film with Emilio Estevez and Harry Dean Stanton. Like that's a movie that I think is like on the same wavelength as this, of just these like really bizarre, really strange 80s cult sci-fi films that are just like, they're just going for it, man. And that's what I appreciate.
You know what I think, now that I'm just kind of trying to package all my thoughts together on the fly here, I'm trying to, like, I'm questioning myself. I questioned myself last night as well after watching it, being like, why do I like David Lynch films? Right? Mm-hmm. Why am I okay when that happens? And I think I just came up with it right now in my head. And I think it's because Lynch films never verbalize the rules of the world. And I think, you know me and my rules.
What are the rules? What are the rules? What are the rules? What are the rules?
I get hung up on them, and I just, it's something that it's like a knee-jerk reaction. I gotta make sure the rules of the world work. And if you're talking sci-fi and you're talking aliens and you're talking powers and this and that, you know, you gotta live by the rules. And I think Lynch films don't ever define anything. So when the crazy non-plot like things happen, you're able to go with it. But in this movie, like, you know, they mention that Buckaroo gets zapped with electricity and now he can see the aliens for what they are, you know, a la They Live, you know? Mm-hmm. But in the same shots, you know, there's the alien version with other people seeing him as well, and it's, the filmmaking language is off because it's never clear whose POV we're in. You know, it's just and this comes down to what you're saying about the director being first timer, right? Like, mm-hmm. if he's in a group setting and we're following the group, because this is truly an ensemble. Like, I know Buckaroo Banzai is the main character, but honestly, we follow him around probably as much as we follow everybody else. Mm-hmm. And so it is hard to latch on to when is that alien looking like an alien? When is it looking like a human being? Who can see them exactly? And then we introduce the bubble wrap glasses, right? Where you can see other things. And when is this actually working for who? And then the electrical spark brings a person back to life as well. And it's just, it is a movie that's throwing things at the wall, and sometimes I am okay with it and others I'm not. And I again, that's the beauty of film. That's the beauty of art. So I guess, yeah, fair enough that we can have a discussion like this. But this one, just, I think it lays out too many rules. I think that's what it is. To me, what I'm thinking it out right now, it lays out too many rules, so it makes me frustrated when it breaks them.
I guess I want to go back to you doing the David Lynch comparison, because you're certainly not, I'm sure you're not the only person who's ever, like, you know, brought up that comparison to this movie, but I really want to like argue against that, because I don't think Buckaroo Banzai is weird at all in the same way that David Lynch is weird. Like, it's not going for the same thing. Like, David Lynch is like, you know, like a dark surrealism, and Buckaroo Banzai is not surreal. Buckaroo Banzai is, so the weirdness of Buckaroo Banzai, I think, and okay, now this is where I'm probably going to sound a little pretentious, but you're used to it. When I try to think like why this movie would speak to me more than it would speak to you, right? Because like, so why I think you still like David Lynch. I'll speak for you, Chris. You don't mind, right?
No, that's okay. That's fine.
It's because at the end of the day, David Lynch creates these bizarre sequences that might not make a lot of narrative sense, but always have a really strong emotion to them. Like, there's like this really strong emotional undercurrent to everything he does that is somehow affecting you on some sort of level. So I think, like, you know, that's why I think David Lynch is a lot of people's, like, their entryway into surrealism, but also maybe as far as they go, right? A lot of people are like, I like David Lynch, but I don't know if I'm going to go I'm not going to get into, like, the really obscure, bizarre, like, Stan Brakhage type experimental filmmaking or anything. Right? Yeah. So anyway, but to me, that's not even what Buckaroo Banzai is aiming for. What I think Buckaroo Banzai is aiming for, and why I think I might dig it a little bit more than you, is I think a lot of it is parody of like old, like 50s and 60s sci-fi, like in particular like 50s sci-fi, right? So when I hear them say things like, you know, when they say that the villains are Lectroids from Planet 10 by way of the 8th dimension, that just brings a smile to my face because I hear that and I think I get like, oh, you know what they're doing? They're doing a riff on those stupid old like 50s atomic age sci-fi films. That's clearly what they're aiming for, right? So it's like it's heavily a parody of that. And those movies were filled with like ridiculous exposition, nonsense science, goofy aliens, and this is like this is doing that like that modern riff on it. And then the other thing is when you mentioned something earlier about like the movie just like throwing a lot of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. To me, what proves that the movie's kind of knowing about it and is like does have a winking sense is it does throw in things that are clearly meant to be jokes to that end, right? And to me, like one of my favorite moments in the entire movie, and I'm sure this is like a fan favorite, I didn't look too much into it, is when the Hong Kong Cavaliers are chasing the aliens through Buckaroo Banzai's headquarters. And Jeff Goldblum is like the most recent addition to the band, right? He's a surgeon that was helping Buckaroo with the surgery at the beginning of the film. And Buckaroo was so impressed with his medical abilities, he said, hey, can you sing? Because if you can sing, you could join my band. And Jeff Goldblum was like, well, I can't really sing, but I can dance. And so he's like, okay, yeah, you can join. And he joins and takes the name New Jersey, and he becomes the newest addition. So you think maybe Jeff Goldblum is going to be like the audience surrogate character. That's what a normal film would have done, right? Since he's like the new addition, but not really. He's just kind of there. He is the new guy, but you're never put into his perspective too much. However, there is one great scene that does that where they're chasing the aliens through the headquarters and they come into this one room and there's this like gigantic piece of like some kind of technological equipment with a watermelon sitting on it. And Goldblum sees that and says to the other Cavalier, why is there a watermelon there? And the guy just goes, I'll tell you later. And they leave. And it's never resolved, nor do I think it was ever meant to. And that made me laugh. And I was like, okay, I see the movie gets it. The movie has a sense of humor about saying, it knows that like, it's like, we know how weird this is. We know that by doing that, we're creating this question of what is that watermelon doing there? What is that meant to be? But we're not ever going to answer that. It's just meant to be silly and meant to be a parody of that kind of bizarre world building and science of those old 50s films.
See, and where I'm going to push back on you, because I've heard that said from a few people that love the movie, and that scene was put in there because it goes back to the production of Bagelman having his greasy hands all over the movie and telling him to change things here and there. And then he inexplicably just kind of disappeared on the film entirely. So then Richter and Rauch were like, well, let's just throw this weird watermelon thing to test. When we send the dailies and we get notes, let's test them and see if we have any more oversight on this. And they did that thing, and there was no comment, and they were allowed to include it, and it was completely ignored. So then they were like, fuck it, we can do whatever we want.
Yeah, and I love that. See, and that's what I mean. And they just decided to leave it in because they could have taken it out after that, but they said, no, let's.
I know, but that's not exactly your little thesis. Your thesis is saying they knowingly put on it because it's like it's a tribute or it's a parody or this and that. It was like, no, they were testing out their fucking boss.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of other stuff in there that's clear. Like I said, like even just the idea of like lectroids and like the eighth dimension and this idea of two different warring alien. There's no doubt to me that this is parodying the same thing that Flash Gordon and Star Wars it was trying to genuinely like homage, right? This is instead like a parody of that.
And I totally get the Lectroid Planet 10 thing. Like I don't know if I've ever mentioned it to you much, but I was a huge fan of the old Lost in Space show.
Yeah, you mentioned it in the last episode, I think.
Oh, I did. Okay, great. So yeah, I used to wake up before going to elementary school. I used to wake up early and I'd watch an episode of Lost in Space and then Three's Company, and then I would go to school. So Lost in Space was like my favorite. My dad loves Lost in Space. So the parody is not lost on me. That's all I want to say. So like I do understand, and it's great. I mean, it's a great Lectroids from Planet 10. Like that's awesome. Like it's a great describer, But yeah, it just feels like I don't know. It's just not working. Like I hate to say it. Like I hate to seem so blasé about it, but it's even. They mention him as a martial arts guy, and we never see him do martial arts, and he's half Japanese, and well, that's a little bit of whitewashing. They this is a different time, obviously, but they very different time. But the way Asian Americans were handled in the 80s, and well, for a lot of it.
Peter
was
Peter Weller would not get cast as Buckaroo Banzai today.
No. And passing him off as Asian, half Asian, and dyeing his hair jet black and dressing up like a samurai for one scene is probably not the way to go. And also naming his band the Hong Kong Cavaliers, but not including at least one Asian person, is a choice. But again, that's more about the times than now. So it's hard to shit on it then.
Maybe it was Professor Hakata that named him that.
Yeah, with like the over-the-top Japanese accent. A staple of the 80s.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some performances, though.
Sure.
I mean, I think we've we said enough about like just the general vibe and everything of the movie. So let's get to some more specific things.
Of course.
So I'll first ask you: were there any performances that, even in your intense dislike for this film, did any performances like stick out? Who were your MVPs here?
Yeah, like I mean, I was disappointed that Jeff Goldblum couldn't be any Goldblum-y. That was one thing. So, but I did like, this
was pretty early in the Goldblum reign, though. So he wasn't getting cast at this point to do Jeff Goldblum yet.
That's fair. That's fair. But it's the hits, right? Like, I liked Christopher Lloyd. I like what he's doing.
We should say we should tell the listeners what is the name of Christopher Lloyd's character.
Yes, he's playing an alien named John Big Booty.
Yeah, John Big Booty. Or everyone calls him Big Booty, and then he's always like, "It's Big Booty."
Yeah, that's a pretty funny line. But he's good. It's always great to see him. Peter Weller's an interesting actor. I like him a lot. I love his voice. Like I love the way he looks. He's always like stoic and powerful, but yet charming. Like he's intense, especially because of the voice. But I'm not like it's not off-putting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I like him a lot. There's a couple lines that he has in this that are great.
Yeah, I think he is. I think he's good in this, but never great in it.
No. Well,
I think it is. He said he had a hard time figuring out this character, and he came up with all these different things to mash together. I get where he's coming from, right? I think he is looking at it. You just nailed it, right? He wants to be the dashing hero. He wants to be charismatic, but he wants to be stoic, because I think his mentality, maybe the filmmaker's mentality, was Buckaroo Banzai needs to be the calm center in all of this, right? Yeah. Because he's the guy none of this flaps him, right? He takes all this as normal. So he has to be like, he has kind of to shrug off the insanity of all this. And so he's playing it that way. And I think that's where it's good to have a Peter Weller, because he's got that old school classic Hollywood feel to him.
Oh, that's a good way of saying it.
To where it works. But I wouldn't be opposed in like a reinvention of Buckaroo Banzai to make Buckaroo himself a little more wild, to make him a little bit goofier of a character. And I think that's one element where they were kind of afraid to push it as much as they could.
You just want Ryan Reynolds.
Definitely not. No. I'll tell you who I think would be good in a little bit when we talk about the aborted relaunch. But
Right. I also think it's hard for him to shine because it's such a huge ensemble. Honestly, that was my big thing was seeing the cast members. I was like, oh wow, like I'm in for a treat. But really, everybody has a small amount of time, I would say. And then John Lithgow just kind of takes over.
Blacks are on this planet, here in the New Jersey, coming to destroy us. We must act, escape, or die. We must work faster to finish the great vehicle itself, so we can enter the 8th dimension and free our trapped comrades. So we can return home and seize power once again.
chomping scenery.
Yeah, like, he's absolutely insane doing like the worst Italian accent ever. Even though he's on record saying that it was the tailor on the Fox lot who.
That was a really cool story, actually. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that he during this Q&A, he was asked like where like that voice had come from, this extremely crazy Italian accent, and he goes, well, funnily enough, he got this guy a credit on the film who was the tailor on the Fox lot, where he he had just this strange accent, and he recorded him doing lines from the movie. And then Lithgow just kind of went back to his trailer and back to his home and just try to reproduce it.
Yeah.
I still question if it was that over the top.
No, he did say he said he put a little extra. Like I watched another thing with him where he said he put a little extra bit on it. He wanted to get like the basic Italian accent, but then he like pushed it. But I do love that he took the time to make sure that guy got a credit.
That was cool.
As John Lithgow's dialect coach, which was not true, but he made sure they put him in the credits as that.
Yeah, that was cool. So yeah, like they were the highlights, I guess. Clancy Brown was wasted. That I love seeing Clancy Brown. He's got that great voice, and he comes in and out of this film, and then he's gone. And that
anytime Clancy Brown's in a movie and he's not playing the Kurgan from Highlander, you're basically wasting him. The Kurgan should just be in everything. It's one of those things where because everybody's in this, it's just some people are wasted. Like it's really cool to see. I always love anytime Dan Hedaya and Vincent Schiavelli show up. Those are just two of those like recognizable faces. Like it's like, hey, it's those guys, and here they're like working together. They're like Big Booty's two sidekicks, but they don't really get to do anything. The only thing I found very interesting is when I don't know if you agreed with this. One thing I will give this movie for, some of the effects are dated in a charming way, right, in a cheap way. But the alien makeups I thought were cool looking. And when they take their like Lectroid form, the Lectroid versions of Dan Hedaya and Vincent Schiavelli still look like Dan Hedaya and Vincent Schiavelli and Christopher Lloyd. Actually, you can see those actors like in the alien form. So I give them credit for that because usually when I watch one of these movies and they go into an alien form, they just all look the same, right?
Yeah.
They just look like one kind of mask. And I like that they had some still defining characteristics to them. Did
you like how the Lectroids were based off of a Canadian-American paleontologist, Dale Russell? He extrapolated what dinosaurs might have evolved into if they had survived, and they called them dinosauroids, and that's the basis of the design.
I liked it until you told me it was Canadian. Now I don't like it anymore.
You son of a bitch.
I don't know, like it's like a more subtle performance. Like I don't understand, it's not the right word, but who I actually did quite like in this, and it's not like a name, and I doubt like you even like recognize this guy at all. But the main Hong Kong Cavalier, Perfect Tommy, the blonde one, he's played by Lewis. He's played by Lewis Smith, and I think he's actually like my favorite of the Cavaliers in this movie. I think he is like, you really get I think he really does nail the Buckaroo's best friend and like main sidekick kind of vibe. Mm-hmm. And I think he's really good in this. He was like. There was another movie in the 80s with him. I think it was called The Heavenly Kid. Yeah, that's right. And that was another movie that was like on TV like all the time. So whenever I see him, I think of that. But I think he's quite good in this as well. Yeah. Alan Barkin, I don't know, man. That's to me like the most underserved character in this. This like idea of him finding this woman who just happens to be the identical twin sister of his dead wife, but for some reason she doesn't know about that. I'm sure that was something that, again, comes from Rausch's gigantic, overexpansive world building of this, and I'm sure it's something that they would have gotten to the sequel. In fact, I guarantee it, because the idea was his wife was killed by this arch nemesis that we never see, that was going to be in the sequel. Right. But because it's not in this one, she's too much of a question mark in this, I think. And she's not giving a bad performance, but there's just nothing like particularly memorable about her.
What is Ellen Barkin most famous for? I know her name. Like as soon as it flashed on the screen, I was like, oh, I know that name from a bunch of stuff. But like I can't pinpoint really anything that should be iconic. Can you?
I mean, I'd say at this time she was like in Eddie and the Cruisers, which was like another popular 80s film. Diner, I would think, is probably one of the main ones she's known for. Yeah. She is one of those actresses, I feel like she is one of those actresses that everyone kind of knows, but like never blew up in the same way that like a lot of her like 80s contemporaries did, right? She never had like a Sigourney Weaver level kind of hit, or a Gina Davis, or even like a Melanie Griffith or something. You know, she just kind of... She never quite got there, which is too bad because I think she is good. And like one thing I do love about Ellen Barkin is I don't know if she's still on Twitter, but for a long time she was known for having like one of the most entertaining Twitter accounts, because she is just very like she says what's on her mind, and she has like this very like filthy mouth, but like a very fun way. Like she seems like someone who'd be like really cool to go out and get some beers with. That's what I'll say about Ellen Barkin.
Maybe that's more what I'm thinking of, is just her like online persona right now.
Yeah.
She's actually in a movie right now on Netflix, The Man from Toronto. Another Canadian...
I'm not going to watch it. It already sounds terrible. Yeah.
Son of a bitch. I'll get you, America.
It is also just really quick. We already mentioned it, but it's always very weird to see young Jonathan Banks. It's like it's one of those things where your brain can't quite handle it, you know, like
because he looks exactly the same, except like just smoother.
It looks like they put him through an Instagram filter.
Totally. Yeah, 100%. Still got the same like kind of lazy eye going on. He's got the same eyebrow. Yeah. It's very strange. He's dispatched of way too soon. I like him. One other thing I wanted to mention before maybe we talk about, the aftermath and legacy of the film. Did you like how it was like the most anticlimactic explosion finale of all time? It literally happens in the background.
2 movies down, Flash Gordon and Buckaroo Banzai, and so far both of them have had very disappointing anticlimactic dispatchings of the main villain. So we're just waiting. We're waiting till we get a good one here. We'll see.
And again, is it by design or is it an homage to these serials, or is it just incompetence between those 2 films? I'm not sure.
I guess we'll see. We'll see if our next film corrects this trend. But yeah, but I will So here's where I will say for whatever the other problems are that Bagelman created, I think he might have been right about let's throw on this weird little music video thing at the end, because at least that sends you on a little bit more of a memorable note.
Yeah, and the music there is quite fun. It's it's peppy.
It doesn't feel right for the movie at all. And again, that's why it's funny. It's sort of what is this? Why is this the main theme suddenly? But all the characters walking together through this culvert in LA, and even the dead characters come back. It's like a curtain call, right? So I just thought that was very amusing, and it's definitely one of the things that I've always remembered about the movie, and I'm sure that's probably the case with many people who have seen it.
It's funny the music wasn't ready for when they filmed it, because again, Bagelman didn't like that the movie ends on a kiss, and it was we need to add something else. So then they go back and film this march through the LA River. But the music wasn't ready, so they filmed it playing Billy Joel's Uptown Girl. So I learned that if you play Uptown Girl during that, they are noticeably dancing to the beat. Yeah. So
that's the one time where, because Peter Weller actually does some dance moves during that. Yeah, it's that during that music video, he suddenly comes alive a little bit more than he does through the majority of the movie's runtime. That's where you see a little bit more lively pep in his step from Buckaroo Banzai there.
Well, yeah, he was about to rap and then get paid and get the fuck out of there.
He's I got this RoboCop thing that apparently I've been hearing about. But
excuse me, I have to go. Somewhere there is a crime happening.
That's kind of cool when a guy in the middle of the 80s gets to be to the high echelon of geekdom, gets this.
Yeah, and I think I think for whatever you want to say about Peter Weller, is he the best actor in the world? Is he I think he's pretty good, but I will say, for someone to look at both Buckaroo Banzai and RoboCop and have the courage and wherewithal to be yeah, I'll do those. That's pretty cool, because I could see how most actors would be scared off by either of those. Right, because on the page, both of those must have been huh? You know, and like I said, he had to really be talked in this one. And I know RoboCop was a tough thing for him to do, but the fact that he was he saw something in those, that makes me think he must be a pretty cool dude. And also the fact that I've seen him. Chris, have you ever seen the T-shirt that says, it's just a black T-shirt and then a white text? It says, "Remember when RoboCop shot that guy in the dick?"
I have seen that shirt, yes.
Yeah, and I've seen multiple pictures of Peter Weller standing next to people wearing that shirt with just a huge smile on his face. So the fact that he loves that shirt makes me also like Peter Weller.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
You know what I liked about this discussion between me and you is first of all, it's been a while since we've had, very opposing views on something. So it's kind of nice. It's kind of fresh. Wake me from my slumber, But we're very Ebert and Siskel today. Because it's funny, because like I said, Ebert gave us a thumbs down. Siskel, however, gave a thumbs up. Fresh and inventive compared to a lot of the movies we see. So really, that is your side. My side is maybe a little less than Ebert's, but definitely, again, I am, what's the word?
Dumb?
Well, that was uncalled for.
Sorry. I told you, I said I would die for this movie. I gotta get defensive here.
Yeah. Didn't Ebert and Siskel hate each other at a certain point?
Yeah. They did not
Yeah. So is that what's gonna happen? That's already happened, has it?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. Good. Okay.
We're kind to each other in public, but in fact, you can feel the actual tension in these conversations.
I'm plotting your demise.
Can I just quickly ask though,
Sure.
just to start winding this down a little bit?
Yep.
Were there any particular plot elements or ideas in this that you did like? Was there anything that you would point to and say, okay, I didn't ultimately go for it, but here's the thing that I actually thought was kind of cool. I'm just curious because I'll tell you, I mentioned it briefly, but one thing we didn't talk a lot about. And this is not unique to this movie, but I always love this idea. And in fact, I know there's at least a couple other movies we're going to do in the future that has a similar thing. I love the idea of the Blue Blazers. I love whenever the hero of your film has these civilian cohorts. And so there's this idea that because Buckaroo Banzai is known around the world, he's this famous rock star, he also recruits random civilians to be Blue Blazers that, depending on where they are in the country, because they go on these adventures all across the world, he can send out a radio signal and says if there's any Blue Blazers around here, I need help. And I do love when that mechanic dad and his young son get involved, and just how quickly they become part of the gang. I really like those two, and I really like the kid. I think he's very funny.
Yeah, he's good. And usually kid actors not so good.
Yeah.
What I liked is, I don't know, I guess I wrote in my notes that it was Men in Black mixed with They Live mixed with Back to the Future. So there's a lot of those elements I like, but I think I like them because I like those movies. You know what I mean? And of course, those were my first introductions to that concept that this movie's also doing. So I don't know. I think I liked things like that. I liked some of the alien ship design. It was more organic than clean and Star Warsy.
What about those giant chairs they sat on?
That was so stupid. The whole time I'm like, how'd they get up there? They need a ladder for their chairs. I didn't like a lot of it, honestly. Obviously, geez. But I will not be watching it again. I will not give it more chance to put the puzzle together. I watched enough summarizations at this point, and just in the research wise, that I feel like I've seen it again. So that's enough. But who loves this movie, Trev, is a man named Kevin Smith. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Yeah, I think I've heard of him. I think I feel like he does a little bit of self-promotion, so I might have come across some of that.
Okay. How so? In the print, in the paper, in the funny pages?
All of it.
There's literally there's a plane outside my window right now that is writing his name in the sky.
It's often said that every new media form is almost immediately taken by porn, right? Whatever the new thing is, computers exist now. Okay, well we got to get porn on it. Oh, phone calls, we have to have phone sex, right? In the home video where they always say VHS beat out beta because VHS is the one that had porn, right? So porn is just the first thing that takes over every new media. The second thing is Kevin Smith finds a way to promote himself on it, any kind of new technology or media. Yeah.
Shameless promoter Kevin Smith in May of 2016 announced that he'd be adapting the film for television via MGM and Amazon. Gigantic fan. I quoted it by saying pure art. That was his line about this film. So.
Yeah, like I said, he hosted that. It was at a film festival about 10 or so years ago. He introduced the film and did the Q&A with Lithgow and Peter Weller. But he did this whole speech at the beginning about how that was a movie that he was obsessed with as a kid when he saw it, and kind of talked about how it's one of the main reasons he wanted to get into filmmaking was he was just so taken by the creativity he saw on screen. So,
which is hilarious because then you see his filmography.
Yeah, and he never made anything even close to this, no. Right? And I remember even hearing at the time when it was announced. So I'm guessing you probably heard that too at the time, but it meant nothing to you. Mm-hmm. But I remember in 2016 when it was announced that Kevin Smith is going to do this Buckaroo Banzai TV show. Chris, perhaps not surprisingly, this won't shock you to hear my reaction was, well, he's not the right guy for that. I was never excited about that, right? I get that he's a huge fan. I've read some of his comic work and stuff. I bet he could probably write a pretty fun Buckaroo Banzai script, maybe.
Right.
But I wouldn't necessarily trust him. Although I guess if it was a TV show, maybe he wouldn't have been directing all the episodes. So who knows? But yeah, I wasn't super excited about a Kevin Smith Buckaroo Banzai.
Mind you, there was a draft about Nazi cigars, and he did a movie about Nazi sausages. So
that's true. But I will say, and this is to finally pay off something I alluded to earlier. who apparently Kevin Smith has since said, well, we should say that didn't happen. Ultimately, the show didn't happen because there ended up being this whole like legal issue, and MGM ended up like suing Richter and Rausch because Richter and Rausch were saying, well, we own Buckaroo Banzai. And MGM's like, no, we own it, which is weird because like I don't know how the rights would have got back to them or whatever. But whatever the case, Kevin Smith was such a fan of Richter and Rausch and like loved them and loved their movie. He said, I'm not going to do this if they're not involved, and if they're getting like financially hurt by this or their feelings are hurt, I'm just stepping away. But he has since said that who he was thinking of for Buckaroo Banzai, and I don't know if he had any discussions with him or not, was Keanu Reeves, and I love that idea. I do think, like, for what I was saying earlier, I think Peter Weller is good in the role, but I think Keanu Reeves would be exactly what I was looking for in that he would be stoic, but there's like still like that little bit of a gleam and devilish mischief behind his eye a little bit.
Yep.
I think he would be like a perfect Buckaroo Banzai, actually.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot. Weller is almost too stoic at times, where I think Keanu Reeves has a charm that elevates his surfer boy mentality. You know what I mean? Or something like there's something like I just think of The Matrix, right? I mean, he's your audience surrogate main character the whole time, and he's not.
Because I think what you want from Buckaroo that you don't quite get in this is like I said, I get what they're going for. I get they're going for the idea that he's just such an expert in everything that nothing surprises him. But I think you want a Buckaroo who like lives in this world, knows all these crazy things exist, is willing to get involved in them, but is still kind of surprised and like taken aback by some of it. And I think that's what Reeves would do very well. Yeah,
like and no point in this movie does Peter Weller give off any sense of like trouble or confusion or mystery. He just knows everything because again, he's too good. and I understand that's the character. But for me to care about the drama, I need something. Like, surprise him somehow,
Right.
Hell, he's not even surprised by this chick that looks exactly the same as his wife and turns out to be the twin sister, and he's like, whatever about it.
Not that I'm not by any means like an accomplished screenwriter or anything, but you'd think like Screenwriting 101 tells you that if you're going to have this character who's a jack of all trades and can do everything, the way to make that character fun and like compelling is find one thing that he's bad at and make that like the joke, right? Have it be like, well, yeah, he's this great surgeon and he's like this amazing like physicist and he's an awesome rock star, but he can't figure out like how his cell phone works or so. You know what I mean? Like that. Totally. Not that they had cell phones back then, but you just have to find something that everyone else can kind of take the piss out of him for.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So I like the Keanu Reeves thing for sure. I don't like the Kevin Smith thing, but that's it's bullet dodged. How much do we actually believe Kevin stepped away because of his respect for the original creators, though? Come on, get the fuck out of here.
It's that's how he frames it. It sounds just more like that lawsuit just killed the show anyways. Like, I don't think it was going in before. And also, I think that would have been a hard road to get that show on the air at all. Like, this is another property. This is another, like, we said this with, like, Flash Gordon, right? It's a property that everyone's heard the name, but most people remember and know of it because the name is so memorable, right? Buckaroo Banzai. That sticks with people, but I'm guessing a lot of people have either never seen it or have watched it and didn't like it like you did, or have watched it and just been like, huh? So, like, I can't imagine there's actually a lot of, like, Hollywood executives out there who are like, you know what we should reboot? That really confusing, weird movie that only has a really small but intense cult following.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think this is one that people are tripping all over themselves to get going. So I don't know that Kevin Smith show would have ever happened anyways.
It's funny, you're talking about the confusing of, the title or something. The title is something we haven't even talked about, is that it works in a serial way, but I think it's too off-putting, honestly. I think it's too confusing. It's a mouthful. I think in this case, a title does matter. Even just calling it Buckaroo Banzai is better than the adventures of blah, 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 blah.
To be fair, that's what most people call it. Like, I don't think
No, I know.
You rarely hear people say the adventures of Buckaroo Banzai across the 8th dimension.
I know, but when, like somebody today was like, oh, what are you recording tonight? And I was like, the adventures of Buckaroo Banzai across the 8th dimension. And she looked at me like I was a fucking crazy person. And she was like, oh my God, why do you waste your time? And I was like, bring it up to my friend.
You got to get that character established first, right? Like, people are like, now people call it Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it was originally just Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I've long maintained that I think if it had been called Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark from the get-go, I think that actually might have thrown people off. I think they couldn't make his... I don't think they could put his name in the title until the second movie, when people understood what it was.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Mm-hmm. It's like John Carter. You know? They just called it John Carter and nobody gave a shit.
Yeah. But like John Carter's not as interesting sounding as Buckaroo Banzai, I guess. So who knows?
That's true.
I don't know.
That's true.
Now, for those who, like me, who do wish it had gotten a sequel, though, and would be down for seeing more adventures, there finally was a sequel, just not in the format that they initially were hoping for. It took a very long time, but just last year, Earl Mac Rauch finally, after years of talking about it, did publish the sequel novel, Buckaroo Banzai Against the World Crime League, which is actually teased at the end of this film. It does say, look for Buckaroo Banzai's next adventure, Buckaroo Banzai Against the World Crime League. That was meant to be the second film, but instead it now exists in novel form. You can find it in your local bookstore or online. I kind of forgot. I remember hearing about that about a year ago, and it was like, oh, that's kind of interesting, and then kind of forgot about it. Revisiting the film has made me now want to go out and pick up this book and read it to see what we didn't get in movie form, and to see how much, like, is it as weird when you're reading it, right? That's also just a kind of a curiosity of mine. Like, totally. Because you can't be as kind of obtuse as the movie is, I think, in text. So it'd be interesting to hear or to see what it looks like as a novel.
Yeah. I will let you tell me your thoughts.
Yeah. It won't be anytime soon, but I'll get to it eventually.
Yeah. You still got to get back to the Mortal Engines books.
The ones that I was like, yeah, maybe I'll read those, and then I instantly was like, nah.
During the podcast we're recording, and I'm like, do you want to know more about the sequels? And you're like, no, don't spoil me. I would like to read these books one day. And here we are, a year and a half later.
I'll tell you the truth. Like, I actually remember this now. This is coming back to me. After we recorded that podcast, the next day I went online, I looked up, I was like, is there like a cheap box set? And I like found one that I was like looking at it, and like it wasn't quite cheap enough, and I was like, nah. And so I didn't order it, and then I never thought of it again.
Trev can't be trusted. He can't be trusted.
No.
I mean, that's really all I have to say about the movie and its legacy.
Well, the one thing we always ask, like, what?
Did it pass the dread test?
It does not pass the dread test. No, it is too shaggy to pass the dread test. But again, that's what I like about it.
Sure.
But one of the questions we always ask is, like, obviously you know my answer, but would you watch a sequel to this, or like, if not a sequel, like a reboot? Now, if someone did suddenly say, we're making a new Buckaroo Banzai, what would your interest level be? What would it, or the inverse of that is like, what would it take to get you interested, since you did not actually like it?
Maybe some weird form of animation. Maybe even like not anime, but maybe anime, like something animated. I think would go a long way. That's something that I would be more willing to give it the time of day and willing to go on the adventure. If it was an animated form. That's what I would say. Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, I guess, technically it was a book, right? It wasn't a comic?
It was never even really a book. Like, he was like, he wanted to write this as like a novel, but like never actually. He wrote the novelization.
Right.
So there's the novelization of the, or Mac Rauch wrote the novelization, which again, I would read if I bet you though, it's probably not easy to find now.
No.
But there were some Buckaroo Banzai comic books published in the early 2000s as well, I believe, by a company called Moonstone Comics. But I just learned that yesterday, so it's not like they were like a big sensation or anything.
Yeah.
So, so to go to our final thoughts, as I know you wanted to get to, clearly we both recommend it, right?
I don't even have a witty remark. I don't even have a retort for that. But yeah, no, I probably will never watch this again. I guess I respect the ambition ? But in its execution, it was very, very, very frustrating, and maybe one of the, if not the most frustrating movie we have covered on this podcast.
Oh, that's insane! You are an insane person.
Maybe I was frustrated. I couldn't wait for it to be over. I really couldn't. I was like, I just want this to be done. Maybe it's not. Well, maybe it's not Catwoman.
Yeah, come on.
Okay, well, I don't know. You've said some fucking stupid shit, too. Right? I'm allowed to say some stupid shit.
This movie shits all over Wild Wild West's face. That's all I know.
I'm going to watch that one tonight. All right, so this has been Fall Back to the 80s, our 3-month event going back to the films of 1980s. Like we've said, we did Flash Gordon, we did this one. Next episode, we're actually doing a Success to Series, our little spin-off show, which will be a breath of fresh air for me. But we're going to be talking about the Rocky series there. And then we're going to move on to Streets of Fire, 1984, Remo Williams, The Adventure Begins, 1985, Masters of the Universe, 1987, and then capping off Fall Back to the 80s with Shocker from 1989. So, yeah, maybe we'll fight some more. Who knows? I don't
know. There's at least one more coming up that I wonder if it's going to be a fight again. But I don't want to spoil anything about that yet. So.
Our fights are always lighthearted, though. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, you did call me dumb.
Well, I mean, I calls it like I sees it sometimes. You know?
Son of a bitch. Calls it like I sees it. All right, okay, that was. I'll take it. So yeah, follow along at F2F Pod. That's at F2, the number 2F Pod on all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Rate, review, whatever you do. A star rating would be awesome. And just join the tribe, hit that subscribe, and you'll keep along this adventure falling back to the 80s. Mm-hmm. I do have one last thing to say to you, Trev.
Okay.
And this is a little unfortunate now because, after your insults. But no matter where you go, there you are.
That's right, buddy.
I can't escape you. That's funny.
I was waiting for you to do like the obvious pun of being like Buckaroo Banzai, more like fuck you Banzai, or fuck a you Banzai.
Yeah.